Our featured work is The Orphan by Guy de Maupassant. Before the story begins, here is a brief listening guide. Guy de Maupassant's The Orphan was written in the late 19th century, a period marked by burgeoning realism and psychological depth in literature. Maupassant, a master of short stories and novels alike, skillfully explores human nature, social constraints, and hidden tensions beneath mundane domestic life. This novel combines Gothic undertones with naturalistic insights, offering a chilling study of isolation, suspicion, and trust. Listeners will appreciate its subtle build-up to emotional and psychological unease, emphasizing mood over action. Now, let the story begin. The orphan Mademoiselle Source had adopted this boy under very sad circumstances. She was at the time 36 years old. Being disfigured after slipping off her nurse's lap as a child into the fireplace and burning her face shockingly, she had determined not to marry. For she did not want any man to marry her for her money. A neighbor of hers, left a widow just before her child was born, died in giving birth, without leaving a sou. Mademoiselle Source took the newborn child, put him out to nurse, reared him, sent him to a boarding school, then brought him home in his 14th year in order to have in her empty house somebody who would love her, who would look after her, and make her old age pleasant. She had a little country place 4 leagues from Rennes, and she now dispensed with a servant. Her expenses having increased to more than double since this orphan's arrival, her income of 3,000 francs was no longer sufficient to support 3 persons. She attended to the housekeeping and cooking herself, and sent out the boy on errands, letting him also occupy himself in cultivating the garden. He was gentle, timid, silent, and affectionate. And she experienced a deep happiness, a fresh happiness, when he kissed her without surprise or horror at her disfigurement. He called her aunt and treated her as a mother. In the evening, they both sat down at the fireside, and she made nice little dainties for him. She heated some wine and toasted a slice of bread, and it made a charming little meal before going to bed. She often took him on her knees and covered him with kisses, murmuring tender words in his ear. She called him my little flower, my cherub, my adored angel, my divine jewel. He softly accepted her caresses, hiding his head on the old maid's shoulder. Although he was now nearly 15, he had remained small and weak, and had a rather sickly appearance. Sometimes Mademoiselle Source took him to the city to see 2 married female relatives of hers, distant cousins, who were living in the suburbs and who were the only members of her family in existence. The 2 women had always found fault with her for having adopted this boy on account of the inheritance. But for all that, they gave her a cordial welcome, having still hopes of getting a share for themselves, a third, no doubt, if what she possessed were only equally divided. She was happy, very happy, always occupied with her adopted child. She bought books for him to improve his mind, and he became passionately fond of reading. He no longer climbed on her knee to pet her as he had formerly done, but instead would go and sit down in his little chair in the chimney corner and open a volume. The lamp, placed at the edge of the little table above his head, shone on his curly hair and on a portion of his forehead. He did not move, He did not raise his eyes or make any gesture. He read on, interested, entirely absorbed in the story he was reading. Seated opposite him, she would gaze at him earnestly, astonished at his studiousness, often on the point of bursting into tears. She said to him occasionally, "You will fatigue yourself, my treasure," hoping that he would raise his head and come across to embrace her. But he did not even answer her. He had not heard or understood what she was saying. He paid no attention to anything save what he read in those pages. For 2 years, he devoured an incalculable number of volumes. His character changed. After this, he asked Mademoiselle Source several times for money, which she gave him. As he always wanted more, she ended by refusing, for she was both methodical and decided, and knew how to act rationally when it was necessary to do so. By dint of entreaties, he obtained a large sum from her one night, but when he begged her for more a few days later, she showed herself inflexible and did not give way to him further, in fact. He appeared to be satisfied with her decision. He again became quiet, as he had formerly been, remaining seated for entire hours without moving, plunged in deep reverie. He now did not even talk to Mademoiselle Source, merely answering her remarks with short, formal words. Nevertheless, he was agreeable and attentive in his manner toward her, but he never embraced her now. She had by this time grown slightly afraid of him when they sat facing one another at night on opposite sides of the fireplace. She wanted to wake him up, to make him say something, no matter what, that would break this dreadful silence, which was like the darkness of a wood. But he did not appear to listen to her, and she shuddered with the terror of a poor feeble woman when she had spoken to him 5 or 6 times successively without being able to get a word out of him. What was the matter with him? What was going on in that closed-up head? When she had remained thus 2 or 3 hours opposite him, she felt as if she were going insane, and longed to rush away and to escape into the open country in order to avoid that mute, eternal companionship, and also some vague danger, which she could not define, but of which she had a presentiment. She frequently wept when she was alone. What was the matter with him? When she expressed a wish, he unmurmuringly carried it into execution. When she wanted anything brought from the city, he immediately went there to procure it. She had no complaint to make of him. No, indeed. And yet, another year flitted by, and it seemed to her that a fresh change had taken place in the mind of the young man. She perceived it, she felt it, she divined it. How? No matter. She was sure she was not mistaken, but she could not have explained in what manner the unknown thoughts of this strange youth had changed. It seemed to her that, until now, he had been like a person in a hesitating frame of mind who had suddenly arrived at a determination. This idea came to her one evening as she met his glance, a fixed, singular glance, which she had not seen in his face before. Then he commenced to watch her incessantly, and she wished she could hide herself in order to avoid that cold eye riveted on her. He kept staring at her, evening after evening, for hours together, only averting his eyes when she said, utterly unnerved, "Do not look at me like that, my child." Then he would lower his head. But the moment her back was turned, she once more felt that his eyes were upon her. Wherever she went, he pursued her with his persistent gaze. Sometimes, when she was walking in her little garden, she suddenly noticed him hidden behind a bush, as if he were lying in wait for her. And again, when she sat in front of the house, mending stockings while he was digging some vegetable bed, he kept continually watching her in a surreptitious manner as he worked. It was in vain that she asked him, "What's the matter with you, my boy? For the last 3 years you have become very different. I don't recognize you. Do tell me what ails you and what you are thinking of." He invariably replied in a quiet, weary tone, "Why, nothing ails me, Aunt." And when she persisted, "Ah, my child, answer me when I speak to you. If you knew what grief you caused me, you would always answer, and you would not look at me that way. Have you any trouble? Tell me. I'll comfort you." He went away with a tired air, murmuring, "But there is nothing the matter with me, I assure you." He had not grown much, having always a childish look, although his features were those of a man. They were, however, hard and badly cut. He seemed incomplete, abortive, only half finished, and disquieting as a mystery. He was a self-contained, unapproachable being, in whom there seemed always to be some active, dangerous mental labor going on. Mademoiselle Source was quite conscious of all this, and she could not sleep at night, so great was her anxiety. Frightful terrors, dreadful nightmares assailed her. She shut herself up in her own room and barricaded the door, tortured by fear. What was she afraid of? She could not tell. She feared everything: the night, the walls, the shadows thrown by the moon on the white curtains of the windows, and above all, she feared him. Why? What had she to fear? Did she know what it was? She could live this way no longer. She felt certain that a misfortune threatened her, a frightful misfortune. She set forth secretly one morning and went into the city to see her relatives. She told them about the matter in a gasping voice. The 2 women thought she was going mad and tried to reassure her. She said, "If you knew the way he looks at me from morning till night, he never takes his eyes off me. At times I feel a longing to cry for help, to call in the neighbors, so much am I afraid. But what could I say to them? He does nothing but look at me." The 2 female cousins asked, "Is he ever brutal to you? Does he give you sharp answers?" She replied, "No, never. He does everything I wish. He works hard. He is steady. But I am so frightened that I care nothing for that. He is planning something. I am certain of that, quite certain. I don't care to remain all alone like that with him in the country." The relatives, astonished at her words, declared that people would be amazed, would not understand. And they advised her to keep silent about her fears and her plans, without, however, dissuading her from coming to reside in the city, hoping in that way that the entire inheritance would eventually fall into their hands. They even promised to assist her in selling her house and in finding another near them. Mademoiselle Source returned home. But her mind was so much upset that she trembled at the slightest noise, and her hands shook whenever any trifling disturbance agitated her. Twice she went again to consult her relatives, quite determined now not to remain any longer in this way in her lonely dwelling. At last she found a little cottage in the suburbs which suited her, and she privately bought it. The signature of the contract took place on a Tuesday morning, and Mademoiselle Source devoted the rest of the day to the preparations for her change of residence. At 8 o'clock in the evening, she got into the diligence which passed within a few hundred yards of her house, and she told the conductor to put her down in the place where she usually alighted. The man called out to her as he whipped his horses, "Good evening, Mademoiselle Source. Good night." She replied as she walked on, "Good evening, Père Joseph." Next morning, at 7:30, the postman who conveyed letters to the village noticed at the crossroads, not far from the high road, a large splash of blood not yet dry. He said to himself, "Hello, some boozer must have had a nosebleed." But he perceived 10 paces farther on a pocket handkerchief, also stained with blood. He picked it up. The linen was fine, and the postman, in alarm, made his way over to the ditch, where he fancied he saw a strange object. Mademoiselle Source was lying at the bottom, on the grass, her throat cut with a knife. An hour later, the gendarmes, the examining magistrate, and other authorities made an inquiry as to the cause of death. The 2 female relatives, called as witnesses, told all about the old maid's fears and her last plans. The orphan was arrested. After the death of the woman who had adopted him, he wept from morning till night, plunged, at least to all appearance, in the most violent grief. He proved that he had spent the evening up to 11 o'clock in a café. 10 persons had seen him, having remained there till his departure. The driver of the diligence stated that he had set down the murdered woman on the road between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. The accused was acquitted. A will, drawn up a long time before and left in the hands of a notary in Rennes, made him sole heir. So he inherited everything. For a long time, the people of the country boycotted him, as they still suspected him. His house, that of the dead woman, was looked upon as accursed. People avoided him in the street. But he showed himself so good-natured, so open, so familiar, that gradually these horrible doubts were forgotten. He was generous, obliging, ready to talk to the humblest about anything, as long as they cared to talk to him. The notary, Maître Rameau, was one of the first to take his part, attracted by his smiling loquacity. He said at a dinner at the tax collector's house, "A man who speaks with such facility and who is always in good humor could not have such a crime on his conscience." Touched by his argument, the others who were present reflected, and they recalled to mind the long conversations with this man, who would almost compel them to stop at the road corners to listen to his ideas. Who insisted on their going into his house when they were passing by his garden, who could crack a joke better than the lieutenant of the gendarmes himself, and who possessed such contagious gaiety that, in spite of the repugnance with which he inspired them, they could not keep from always laughing in his company. All doors were open to him after a time. He is today the mayor of his township. The reading is followed by a deeper literary commentary. Guy de Maupassant's The Orphan emerges as a poignant exploration of isolation and identity, steeped in the realist tradition that the author so masterfully embodies. The narrative delves into the complexities of orphanhood, a recurring motif in Maupassant's oeuvre that highlights vulnerability within a deterministic social framework. Unlike romanticized treatments, his portrayal is imbued with a profound pessimism and psychological acuity, revealing the alienation faced by characters severed from familial bonds. The story deftly balances melodramatic elements with a detached narrative style, thereby underscoring the protagonist's emotional detachment and existential despair without succumbing to sentimentality. Maupassant's narrative technique employs subtle shifts in perspective and incisive detail to evoke the interiority of the orphan's experience, mirroring broader social dynamics where minor characters echo the isolation inherent to the central figure. This interplay intensifies the thematic tension between the individual and societal constructs, a hallmark of Maupassant's short fiction. Moreover, the nuanced depiction of orphanhood resonates with broader questions about selfhood and human connection. Positioning The Orphan not merely as a tale of personal loss, but as a critique of social indifference and fragmentation. Through this lens, Maupassant's work advances a psychological realism that transcends mere storytelling to offer a penetrating insight into the human condition in late 19th century France. The Orphan is a compact but richly textured novel, offering a haunting interrogation of loneliness, trust, and perceived menace within the confines of a modest provincial household. At its surface, the story revolves around the relationship between Mademoiselle Source, a disfigured, solitary woman who adopts an orphan boy, and the boy himself, who gradually becomes a source of oppressive, inexplicable dread. Maupassant structures the narrative around this domestic tableau, allowing psychological tension to subtly emerge from ordinary circumstances. Mademoiselle Source embodies a figure of tragic self-sacrifice and deep yearning for affection. Having been physically marred since childhood, which has deterred her from marriage, her adoption of the orphan becomes both an act of charity and of emotional survival. The boy, initially gentle and affectionate, bridges her loneliness, providing her with a semblance of family and a purpose. Our initial impression of him is one of tender, almost endearing frailty. He is sickly, quiet, devoted, and intelligent, indulging in scholarly pursuits which only endear him more to Mademoiselle Source. Maupassant meticulously crafts these early scenes to evoke warmth and compassion, lulling readers into a sense of tranquility. However, as the narrative progresses, the tone shifts imperceptibly but decisively. The boy's demeanor changes, from tender and dependent to abstracted and cold, and finally to inscrutable and menacing. This transformation is central to the novel's psychological depth. The boy's withdrawal into silence and unresponsiveness, his increasingly disturbing and fixed gaze, and his inexplicable fixation on Mademoiselle Source create a creeping sense of unease. The boy's alienation in his own home introduces a profound existential tension. He is both a product of the woman's love and the source of her escalating terror. Maupassant deploys this ambiguity masterfully, The reader is never given clear answers about the boy's motives or feelings, forcing us to dwell in uncertainty. Mademoiselle Source's experience of fear underscores the novel's exploration of isolation and vulnerability. Her anxiety manifests physically, trembling hands, sleepless nights, barricading herself within her room, highlighting her fragile psychological state. Intriguingly, her fears are not grounded in overt aggression, but rather in the boy's silent watching, an almost intangible menace conveyed through his gaze. This psychological portrait reflects Maupassant's keen insight into how dread can be born from inexplicable sources, particularly when combined with loneliness and the threat of betrayal within the intimate sphere. The community's intrusive presence and the two female relatives' opportunistic attitudes add a layer of social commentary. They criticize the adoption, expecting to share in the inheritance, yet they dismiss Mademoiselle Source's mounting fears. Their pragmatic, self-serving view contrasts starkly with Mademoiselle Source's emotional turmoil. This familial subplot introduces themes of betrayal and suspicion, suggesting that even the supportive structures of kinship can harbor division and envy. Their cynicism serves to isolate Mademoiselle Source further, reinforcing her vulnerability and alienation. The narrative climax, involving the brutal murder of Mademoiselle Source and the subsequent legal inquiry, is handled with a gripping economy of detail. The murder scene is conveyed through sparse but vivid imagery, the trail of blood, the pocket handkerchief, the corpse, which intensifies the shock of violence within this intimate setting. The investigation and trial become a microcosm of social judgment and doubt. The orphan's acquittal, supported by an alibi, introduces an ironic twist. Despite prevailing suspicions, the law cannot condemn him, reflecting tensions between appearances and legal proof, popular opinion and justice. The aftermath, in which the orphan inherits the estate and gradually assimilates into local society, serves as a poignant coda, complicating how we judge guilt and innocence. His geniality and social charm disarm suspicion, prompting the community to accept him, even elevate him to mayor. Maupassant's depiction of this transformation critiques social dynamics of suspicion and forgiveness, and the ways in which charisma can mask deeper truths. It leaves readers ambivalent about the boy's true nature and actions, a testament to Maupassant's nuanced storytelling. Stylistically, Maupassant's prose is economical yet evocative, loaded with psychological nuance. Let us now examine the work through its primary analytical perspective. Guy de Maupassant's The Orphan unfolds as a poignant exploration of human vulnerability, social dynamics, and the shadowy recesses of psychological transformation deeply embedded in the cultural and intellectual fabric of 19th century French society. The story traces Mademoiselle Source's act of compassion and maternal longing within the context of social isolation and the stigmatization of physical deformity. Her decision to adopt the orphaned boy, stemming from a complex matrix of loneliness, moral resolve, and financial considerations, situates the narrative in humanistic realms, where love, dependency, and fear intermingle. The disfigurement of Mademoiselle Source, symbolizing both physical and social otherness, underlines a cultural tendency to equate physical appearance with worth and identity. which she herself anticipates by refusing marriage lest she be valued for her money. The orphan's adoption is initially a gesture of renewal and hope, but it becomes entangled with inheritance anxieties, reflecting intellectual and cultural preoccupations during Maupassant's time about money, legitimacy, and family. This dynamic introduces a symbolic tension between affection and pragmatism, further complicated by Mademoiselle Source's relatives, who cast judgment from a utilitarian perspective. As the narrative progresses, the orphan's evolution from a gentle, affectionate boy into a taciturn, unsettling figure illustrates a psychological descent or transformation. Symbolically mirroring the darkening atmosphere of mistrust and fear in the household. His withdrawal into books and silence suggests a burgeoning intellectual alienation, while the changes in his demeanor connect to themes of identity formation, power inversion, and the inscrutable nature of human consciousness. The boy's gaze, described as a relentless and cold observation, becomes a symbol of surveillance and latent menace, inducing profound anxiety in Mademoiselle Source. Underscoring the story's humanistic inquiry into interpersonal dynamics and the fragility of trust. The social and psychological milieu of the story captures cultural fears surrounding inherited wealth and the outsider's role within family structures. Intertwined with the intellectual investigations of human motives and ethical ambiguities. Mademoiselle Source's fear of the orphan transcends rational explanation, embodying a symbolic human intuition regarding hidden malevolence or betrayal. Her ultimate demise, violently severing her voice and agency, speaks to the dramatic culmination of these themes and the tragic consequences of isolation, vulnerability, and mistrust. The aftermath, which reveals the orphan's acquittal and eventual social rehabilitation, probes questions about justice, reputation, and community reintegration. His transformation into a mayor, despite public suspicion, exposes the mutable nature of social identity and the capacity of individuals to reinvent themselves or manipulate social perceptions. A second perspective reveals further dimensions of the work. From an aesthetic standpoint, Maupassant's The Orphan offers a meticulously crafted form that balances narrative simplicity with profound psychological tension. The style is marked by an unadorned yet evocative prose that draws the reader into the subdued, claustrophobic world of Mademoiselle Source and the boy. The shifts in tone, from tender domesticity to ominous suspense, are rendered with subtlety, illustrating Maupassant's mastery of atmosphere and pacing. Imagery plays a crucial role in evoking the sensory experience of the story, notably through contrasts between light and dark, warmth and coldness. Scenes by the fireside juxtapose the comforting glow of hearth light with the chilling silence and penetrating gazes exchanged in those same moments. The recurring motif of the boy's eyes, described as fixed and cold, conjures a sensory effect of unease that permeates the narrative. This penetrating gaze is not only visual, but almost tactile in its intensity, creating a sensation of being watched that unsettles both Mademoiselle Source and the reader. Maupassant's style exhibits a controlled economy where every detail, from the boy's physical description to subtle gestures, accumulates to form a powerful artistic experience. The gradual change in the boy's behavior is mirrored by changes in the narrative rhythm. Where earlier passages maintain a gentle, flowing cadence, later sections become fragmented and stark, reflecting the growing psychological disquiet and foreshadowing tragedy. Finally, here are several companion works worth reading. For readers interested in exploring further the themes and stylistic qualities found in The Orphan, Maupassant's own The Piece of String offers a resonant reflection on suspicion, social judgment, and the fragile nature of reputation within rural society. Like The Orphan, it delves into human psychology and social dynamics with incisive realism and subtle irony. Émile Zola's Thérèse Raquin presents another compelling companion, combining psychological complexity with a narrative about guilt, fear, and betrayal within intimate relationships. Zola's emphasis on naturalistic detail and the destructive potential of human passions echoes Maupassant's exploration of alienation and dark human motives. Closely related are the works of Fyodor Dostoevsky, especially The Brothers Karamazov, which delve into questions of morality, inheritance, and the enigmatic aspects of human character. Dostoevsky's psychological depth and thematic focus on familial conflict and existential fears enrich conversations around Maupassant's depiction of the orphan's troubling silence and eventual social rebirth. Finally, the short stories of Edgar Allan Poe, particularly The Telltale Heart, provide a fascinating aesthetic and thematic intertext, as both Poe and Maupassant engage eerie atmospheres, unreliable perceptions, and the psychological unraveling that blurs the line between victim and perpetrator, enhancing the haunted quality of The Orphan. These works collectively complement The Orphan by illuminating shared concerns with human psychology, societal pressures, and the artistic depiction of fear and suspense, inviting a nuanced understanding of Maupassant's powerful narrative.